We're going to continue solving trigonometric equations, but today we're going to have to use some factoring in the process of doing it. So we are going to actually increase the number of answers in this also. But one of the things you need to pay attention to as we're doing this is you need to pay attention to what interval are they looking for their answers into. Okay? So if they don't give you an interval, that means they want all real numbers, or they want all possible answers, which means then you've got to do plus k whatever or n whatever. Okay. So here we've got, they want us to find the solutions between negative pi and pi for 4 sine squared of x plus sine of x plus 1. Now you could do this with your calculator, okay? But we're going to learn how to do these without. Okay, I mean, we still will end up using it somewhat, but not completely. So first thing we need to do is factor. Okay. And this is a situation where substitution will help you with factoring. Okay. So what we can do to start with is let u equal the sine of x. Or whatever variable you want. So now we have 4u squared plus 5u plus 1 equals 0. So it makes the factoring easier without sign in there. So what do we get when we factor this? What, Allie? Good. 4u plus 1 and u plus 1. So if we solve them, then we get u equals negative 1/4 and u equals negative 1. So now we're going to put sign back into it. So now they want to know, so what are the values for x then? Well, sine of x equals negative 1 where? Where does sine equal negative 1? 3 pi over 2. The only problem is 3 pi over 2 is not between negative pi and pi. So what is equivalent to 3 pi over 2 in that interval? Okay, what? Negative pi over 2. Okay, so there's one of my answers right there for when sine of x equals negative 1. Now remember that what this is encompassing is the fact that we're looking at the region that starts here and comes back around to there. So we're at negative pi here, negative pi over 2, 0, pi over 2, and positive pi back over here. So in that region also, when does sine equal negative 1/4? Well, that means we have y values that of, let's go here, no, of negative 1/4. So somewhere in here, we're going to have a reference angles to help me. Okay, because sine is equal to the negative in the third and fourth, right? Okay, just like the problem we were just talking about. So then we have to figure out what they are. So I'm going to need to use my calculator to find that reference angle that I can utilize to get those two answers. So take our calculator, and we will do the inverse sine of negative 0.25. And that's a really nice angle. This is definitely not in radians, correct? So let me change my mode back to radians. And we get negative 0.25 radians. Okay, is that between negative pi and pi? Yes, it is. Okay, so one of my answers here then is going to be also approximately negative 0.25. And that tells me then that this angle right here, is 0.25 radians. Well, that means that this angle right here is 0.25 radians also. So how do I find that when we're talking about going from negative pi to pi? So if this is 0.25 right here, that angle, well, we know that's 0.25 away from negative pi, right? Okay. Am I going to add it or subtract it? So here's the question. Is the number I get here going to be closer to 0 or farther away from 0? Because if I'm at negative pi and I'm going this way, I'm getting closer to 0, right? So that means this number is going to be between negative pi and 0. So I'm going to need to take my calculator. Well, I probably don't need to do my calculator. And I'm going to do negative 3.14. And if I'm getting closer to 0, that means I need to add 0.25. So it's going to be negative 2 point, what? 89, Mr. Patera says. You agree with that? Well, let's see. If I took away 0.1, it would be 3.04, and then 2.94, and then 2.89. Look at that. Come on, don't do that to me. There we go. Okay. So there's my answers. So x equals negative pi over 2, negative 0.25, and negative 2.89. Now, if we had to, okay, now we're going to solve this by factoring, but I could, if I absolutely had to, no other choice, if I had a calculator in hand, which you're going to need a calculator anyway because you don't know what the sine, when sine equals 0.25. So if I actually type this in then, 4 sine of x squared plus 5 sine of x and plus 1. And we're going to graph this from negative pi to pi. And we want to know when it equals 0. Well, it equals 0, how many places there? 3 of them. Okay. So let's test my answers. The answers are negative pi over 2. Okay. So we'll trace it in negative pi divided by 2. Yep, that's 0. Okay, that one worked. Negative 0.25. All right, that's pretty close, 0.0078. And negative 2.89. All right, that's pretty close, 0.00316. Okay, so if we absolutely had to, we know how to graph and find them also, don't we? Okay. But the only thing is with that, would you know that this is exactly pi over 2? And hopefully you would, because if you put in negative 1.57, you better know that that's pi over 2. Okay, that 1.57 is pi over 2. Has been, always will be. All right, let's look at number 8. Now, in reality, this one should be easier. Okay, here's why. First thing we want to do is we want to make sure it's equal to 0. Always, okay, when we're solving equations, and most of the time we want it to be equal to 0, and when we're going to solve them by factoring, we definitely want them equal to 0. So we're going to subtract cosine of x from both sides here. Now, we're talking about factoring. Okay? Anybody see anything? Let's go back. When we first started factoring, what was the first thing we always looked for? Something similar, right? Greatest common factor. Do these have a common factor? Yeah, they both have cosine, don't they? So we could take out cosine. That's what you're going to tell me, right, Max? Okay. All right. So we have cosine of x times the quantity sine squared of x minus 1 equals 0. So cosine of x equals 0, and sine squared x equals 1. So we still have cosine equals 0, and sine equals what? How do I get rid of that squared? Take the square root. What's the square root of 1? No, it's not. It's plus or minus 1. Okay? So now this one, this is a relatively easy then, because these are nice and easy on our unit circle. It doesn't say a limitation though, does it? So what does that mean we're going to have to do? It does in yours. What does it say in yours?
0 to 2 pi.
All right, 0 to 2 pi. Excellent. Okay. Does it? Okay, good. I didn't know if I couldn't remember if I put it on there or not. Excellent. Thank you, Gio. All right. So x equals. So when does cosine equal 0 between 0 and 2 pi? Okay, pi over 2 and at 3 pi over 2, right? When does sine equal 1? When does sine equal negative 1? Okay, so my answer is pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. Okay. Number 9. All right, so we want to factor. Negative 6 sine squared x plus cosine of x plus 5 equals 0. What's wrong? Okay. Do they have a greatest common factor? No. Okay. I have something squared, something not squared. What's the problem? What? Does not compute. All right? Because we have sine here and cosine there. Do we know about a relationship to where I could possibly change one or the other so that I can put them together? All right? And Garrett says, is that one of the identities? I don't know. Is that an identity?
Yeah.
Back from chapter 6, I think we were dealing with some identities. Okay. What identity would that involve? This one right here, maybe? The Pythagorean identity that says sine squared of x plus cosine squared of x equals 1. Okay. So sine squared is equal to what? Sine squared is equal to 1 minus cosine squared. So that means I can replace sine squared with 1 minus cosine squared. And then I need to simplify. Okay, can we factor that then? With Mr. Fonzie being awake? Melissa, can you factor this? What do you get? Oh, okay. She knows we can. She's not sure what it is. All right. Logan, how about you? Could I put a U there? Would that help you? Okay. So we'll let cosine of x equal u. So that means we've got 6u squared plus u minus 1 equals 0. So what are the factors of 6? When I combine them with that negative 1, can I get positive 1? 3 and 2. So this is going to be 3. Oh, I want that color. So this is going to be 3 cosine of x minus 1 and 2 cosine of x plus 1 equals 0. Okay. So instead of putting u's here, put my cosine back in there. Okay. Let's see. Let's just check it. We check it. Multiply these two together, I get a positive 3 cosine of x. Multiply these two together, I get negative 2, and 3 minus 2 is positive 1. Worked. Okay. Fantastic. So then we get cosine of x equals 1/3 cosine of x equals negative 1/2. Is positive 1/3 on our unit circle? No. Okay, how about negative 1/2? Okay. I think that is, isn't it? Okay, so x equals what? When does cosine equal negative 1/2? 4 pi over 3 and 2 pi over 3. Okay, now we just have that 1/3 we got to work with. So when is cosine positive between 0 and 2 pi? Which quadrants? 1 and 4, right? Because it's when x is positive, which would be the first and the fourth quadrants. All right? So we don't know this, so what do I have to do to find the angle then? We're not drawing a triangle. Okay, that won't help us. Okay, we're going to have to use our calculator. How, David? How do we do it? What do we do, David? Use the graph? I don't want to use the graph, though. Okay, Brett says inverse cosine. So we'll do the inverse cosine of 1/3. And that'll give us our answer in the first quadrant because 1.23 is less than 1.57, right? Okay. So one of my answers here then is going to be 1.23. Okay. So if we look at that chart we were just playing around with a minute ago, we're talking about the first quadrant and the fourth quadrant where it equals 1/3. So if this angle right here is 1.23, how do I find that angle there? Well, it would be 360 if we were talking about degrees. So we're going to do, for this one in this angle here, we're going to do 2 pi minus whatever that angle is. And so 2 pi minus 1.23 would be the wonderful number of 5.05, right? 6.28 minus 1.23. And there's our answer. Now, you could have, once again, like I said, if you would have graphed it, you would have found these two numbers, you would have known them, but you wouldn't have known these right away. So you've got to go through the process of factoring like that to make sure you get those exact, accurate numbers. All right, last one, number 10. And here we go. We got another one with two different trig functions. Secant squared and tangent. Is there a relationship between secant squared and tangent that I could change it? Okay, an identity. Paige, what's the identity? Okay, so it's secant squared minus tangent squared equals 1. Okay, so then secant squared is equal to tangent squared plus 1, right? Okay, so we'll use substitution here. Tangent squared plus 1 minus 2 tangent and minus 3 equals 0 because I want to get it equal to 0, so I'm going to move the 3 over. Simplify it. quite the little tail on it too. Okay. Can we factor this? What are the factors of -2 that add up to -2? There isn't any. Dang. What do I need to do then? Quadratic formula. A equals 1, B equals -2, and C equals -2. So the opposite of -2 over 2 times 1 plus or minus square root of -2 squared minus 4 times A times C divided by 2 times A. Hopefully you remember the quadratic formula. So this is 2 over 2 is 1. -2 squared is 4. 4 plus 8 is 12. Now, this is what tangent of x equals. Because that's our variable we're working with. You can, can't you? So this equals 1 plus or minus the square root of 3. Square root of 12 is 2 square roots of 3, and the 2's will cancel. So this means we're going to have to do 2 things. We need to find out when tangent of x equals 1 plus the square root of 3, and when tangent of x equals 1 minus the square root of 3. Well, the nice thing about that is that inverse tangent of 1 plus the square root of 3 is, is a positive 1.299 or 1.22, and inverse tangent of 1 minus the square root of 3, what do you think that's going to be? The negative of that. Oh, no, it's not. Okay, nice try. Okay. So we have to think about this for a second. Okay. 1 plus the square root of 3, is that a positive or a negative? That's a positive number, right? Okay. Since that's a positive number, when is tangent positive? Which quadrants? 1 and 3, right? Okay. Tangent of x equals 1 minus the square root of 3. 1 minus the square root of 3, is that a positive or a negative number? Negative, right? Because square root of 3 is approximately 1.73. Okay. So that means we're talking about when tangent's negative, which is in the second and the fourth. Okay, so let's look at this for a second. So here's my numbers I got. So if we look at this little chart I like here, we've got in the first, oops, and the third, we have 1.22, and in the second oops, and the fourth, we have 0.63. And we're going from 0 to 2 pi. Well, we have one really easy answer, right? X is approximately 1.22. There's the easy one. How to find this one in the second quadrant then? What do I need to do? What do I need to do? Because we're talking about this angle right here that starts at 0 and goes to this point here. So how would I find that answer? We would do pi minus that angle, 0.63. So what's 3.14 minus 0.63? 2.51. Okay? All right, so then the one in the third quadrant then, we have to do what? Okay, we have to add that number to pi. So 3.14 plus 1.22 would be 4.36, right? Okay. And then what about the one in the fourth quadrant then? Okay, so 2 pi minus 0.63 is 5 point what? 5.65. And there's my answers. Okay. So we're pulling back all of those things we learned with quadratics, a little bit of factoring, a little bit of identities, okay? And then using inverses to be able to do these, okay? Questions? You can use the note cards that you have, but not the unit circle. You cannot put the unit circle on a note card.